Well, here we are at the final episode of A Christmas Carol Deep Dive. We've covered a lot, but we've still got some stuff to go over in this final stave. It's one of the most influential books ever written. Even if you've never read Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, you are familiar with it. My name is Collin and I've loved this story for as long as I can remember. I'm going to be taking a look at all of the movie and TV adaptations of A Christmas Carol that I can, because I love the story that much. This is Scrooge, the Christmas Carol podcast. The Christmas Carol Deep Dive, the end of it. That's not just some cutesy title either. The final stave of A Christmas Carol is in fact simply called The End of It. This will be a much shorter stave than the others have been, but there's still plenty to talk about. The recording is through LibriVox. All of their audiobooks are in the public domain, and all of their recordings are in the public domain. You are free to use them however you wish. Plenty of resources you can check out there. Like I've said in previous episodes, there are multiple versions of A Christmas Carol on LibriVox. This is just my favorite. Really great narrator in Kyle Munley, so I'm going to hand it back over to him as we continue with A Christmas Carol Deep Dive.
Stave 5 of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Stave 5, the end of it. Yes, and the bedpost was his own, and the bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in. "I will live in the past, the present, and the future," Scrooge repeated as he scrambled out of bed. "The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, old Jacob, on my knees." He was so fluttered and so glowing with his good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face was wet with tears.
Dickens does a good job of towing the line between dream and reality here. On one hand, the spirit turns into Scrooge's bedpost when he wakes up. On the other, all the crying he had done was absolutely genuine.
"They are not torn down," cried Scrooge, folding one of his bed curtains in his arms. "They are not torn down, rings and all. They are here. I am here. The shadow of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will be." His hands were busy with his garments all the time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, making them parties to every kind of extravagance. "I don't know what to do," cried Scrooge, laughing and crying in the same breath, and making a perfect loon of himself with his stockings.
So this is one of the times where the audiobook narrator modernizes a bit here. He says a perfect loon of himself. The actual text is making a perfect Laocoön of himself, which is a Greek character that is spelled Laocoon, but there is an umlaut over the second O, which is why it's pronounced that way. He was a mythological figure who was a Trojan priest, and it was Laocoön who was opposed to bringing the Trojan horse into the city of Troy. Despite the naming, the Trojan horse was actually a weapon of the Greeks against the Trojans. There are various depictions of this character's over-the-top death, including by sea serpents, who, in at least one recounting, strangled him. Presumably that is what Scrooge is calling to mind when he puts on his stockings.
"I am light as a feather. I am happy as an angel. I am merry as a schoolboy. I am giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to the world. Hello there. Whoop, hello." He had frisked into the sitting room and was now standing there, perfectly winded. "There's the saucepan that the gruel was in," cried Scrooge, starting off again and going round the fireplace. "There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas Present sat. There's the window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened. Ha ha ha! Really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh, the father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs. I don't know what day of the month it is, Scrooge says. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind, I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hello! Whoop! Hello there! He was checked in his transports by the churches ringing out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Clash, clang, hammer. Ding, dong, bell. Bell, dong, ding. Hammer, clang, clash. Oh, glorious, glorious! Running to the window, he opened it and put his head out. No fog, no mist. Clear, bright, jovial, stirring cold. Cold, piping for the blood to dance to. Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious! What's today? Cried Scrooge, calling downward to a boy in Sunday clothes, who perhaps had loitered in to look about him. Eh? Returned the boy, with all his might of wonder. What's today, my fine fellow? Said Scrooge. Today? Replied the boy. Why, it's Christmas Day. It's Christmas Day, said Scrooge to himself. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow. Hello, returned the boy. Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one at the corner? Scrooge inquired. I should hope I do, replied the lad. An intelligent boy, said Scrooge. A remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one. What, the one as big as me? Returned the boy. What a delightful boy, said Scrooge. It's a pleasure to talk with him. Yes, my buck. It's hanging there now, returned the boy. Is it? Said Scrooge. Go and buy it. Walker! Exclaimed the boy.
Unlike a lot of other expressions in A Christmas Carol that have stuck around, possibly because they're used in A Christmas Carol, Walker really has not. It means something that is simply a lie or too good to be true. The Victorian Web also points out that it can be used as a noun, such as, that is all Walker. You might notice that it has essentially the same usage as humbug. The word is always capitalized, and it's a shortened version of the expression Hooky Walker, that is Hooky, which is a first and last name. As to who Hooky Walker was, it's anybody's guess. There are some theories going around, but they've all been disproven, so the origin's a complete mystery.
No, no, said Scrooge. I am in earnest. Go and buy it, and tell him to bring it here, that I may give them the direction where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown.
I mentioned in a previous installment that there were 20 shillings in a pound. A crown was worth a quarter of a pound, so a half crown would be worth an eighth.
The boy was off like a shot. He must have had a steady hand at a trigger who could have got a shot off half so fast. I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's, whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hands and splitting with a laugh. He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Joe Miller never made such a joke as sending it to Bob's will be.
Joe Miller was an 18th century actor who was well known for playing comedic roles in Shakespeare plays, but was even better known for his joke book. He didn't publish the joke book, however. Joe Miller's Jests, or The Wits Vade Mecum, came out in 1739, the year after Miller died. Vade Mecum is a Latin expression for a guidebook or handbook, and I realize at this point I am now giving footnotes on my footnotes. Anyway, 3 of the jokes in the book are credited to Miller, and it was clearly trying to capitalize on his fame as a comedic actor. The jokes in the book were fairly stale and very old-fashioned, even when they were published. This led to the name Joe Miller becoming another phrase for a joke that had already been told many times over. There are some hilarious inclusions in the book. Two free-thinking authors proposed to a bookseller that was a little decayed in the world that if he would print their works, they would set him up. And indeed, they were as good as their word, for in 6 weeks' time he was in the pillory. Another poet asked Nat Lee if it was not easy to write like a madman as he did. No, answered Nat, but it is easy to write like a fool as you do. A parson preaching a tiresome sermon on happiness or bliss, when he had done, a gentleman told him he had forgot one sort of happiness. Happy are they that did not hear your sermon. And one more hilarious church joke proving that the church is usually the low point of comedy. A melting sermon being preached in a country church, all fell a weeping but one man, who being asked why he did not weep with the rest, "Oh," said he, "I belong to another parish." Yeah, do you remember that scene in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs when they're all singing a verse of the dumbest jokes they ever heard? It's basically that.
The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did, somehow, and went downstairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there, waiting his arrival, the knocker caught his eye. "I shall love it as long as I live," cried Scrooge, patting it with his hand. "I scarcely ever looked at it before. What an honest expression it has on its face! What a wonderful knocker! Here's the turkey! Hallo! Whoop! How are you? Merry Christmas!" It was a turkey. He never could have stood upon his legs, that bird. He would have snapped 'em short off in a minute, like sticks of sealing wax. "Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town," said Scrooge. "You must have a cab." The chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair again, and chuckled until he cried. Shaving was not an easy task, for his hand continued to shake very much, and shaving requires attention, even when you don't dance while you're at it. But if he had cut the end of his nose off, he would have put a piece of sticking plaster over it, and been quite satisfied. He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth, as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present, and walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded every one with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humoured fellows said, "Good morning, sir, a Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge said often afterwards, that of all the blithe sounds he had ever heard, those were the blithest to his ears. He had not gone far, when coming on towards him he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked into his counting-house the day before, and said, "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe?" It sent a pang across his heart to think how this old gentleman would look upon him when they met, but he knew what path lay straight before him, and he took it. "My dear sir," said Scrooge, quickening his pace, and taking the old gentleman by both his hands, "how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir." "Mr. Scrooge?" "Yes," said Scrooge, "that is my name, and I fear it might not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon, and will you have the goodness—" Here Scrooge whispered in his ear. "Lord bless me!" cried the gentleman, as if his breath were taken away. "My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?" "If you please," said Scrooge, "not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you."
When Scrooge talks about back payments here, he is making up for all the times he didn't give to the poor.
"Will you do me that favor?" "My dear sir," said the other, shaking hands with him, "I don't know what to say to such magnificent—" "Don't say anything, please," retorted Scrooge. "Come and see me. Will you come and see me?"
The word that the charity worker gets cut off on is munificence, Munificence, which means extreme generosity.
"I will," cried the old gentleman, and it was clear he meant to do it. "Thank'ee," said Scrooge. "I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you." He went to church, and walked about the streets, and watched the people hurrying to and fro, and patted children on the head, and questioned beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of houses, and up to the windows, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything, could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock. But he made a dash, and did it. "Is your master at home, my dear?" said Scrooge to the girl. "Nice girl, very." "Yes, sir." "Where is he, my love?" said Scrooge. "He's in the dining room, sir, along with mistress. I'll show you upstairs, if you please." "Thank'ee. He knows me," said Scrooge, with his hand already on the dining-room lock. "I'll go in here, my dear." He turned it gently, and sidled his face in, round the door. They were looking at the table, which was spread out in great array, for these young housekeepers are always nervous on such points, and like to see that everything is right. "Fred!" said Scrooge. Dear heart alive, how his niece by marriage started! Scrooge had forgotten, for the moment, about her sitting in the corner with the footstool, or he wouldn't have done it on any account.
This is the follow-up to the hints that Fred's wife is pregnant, and I think this is the most direct reference to it as well. Why would Scrooge be worried about startling her if she were just sitting down?
"Why, bless my soul!" cried Fred. "Who's that?" "It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?" Let him in? It is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece looked just the same. So did Topper when he came. So did the plump sister when she came. So did every one when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness. But he was early at the office the next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15. No Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open, that he might see him come into the tank. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. "Hello!" growled Scrooge in his accustomed voice, as near as he could feign it. "What do you mean by coming in here at this time of day?" "I am very sorry, sir," said Bob. "I'm behind my time." "You are?" repeated Scrooge. "Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please." "It's only once a year, sir," pleaded Bob, appearing from the tank. "It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir." "Now, I'll tell you what, my friend," said Scrooge. "I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. And therefore," he continued, leaping from his stool and giving Bob such a dig in the waistcoat that he staggered back into the tank again, "and therefore I'm about to raise your salary." Bob trembled and got a little nearer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding him and calling to the people in the court for help and a straight waistcoat.
Scrooge is acting so unlike his usual self that Bob is considering having him committed.
"A Merry Christmas, Bob," said Scrooge, with an earnestness that could not be mistaken as he clapped him on the back. "A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop, Bob. Make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit."
So, smoking bishop is a hot drink made from port, red wine, lemons or oranges, specifically Seville oranges, sugar, and spices. There are recipes for it you can find online and in cookbooks, just like the other drinks mentioned in the text. I find it interesting that it is somewhat similar to negus, which Scrooge would have seen at Fezziwig's party. Maybe it inspired him.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the altercation in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset. And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins, as have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards.
This is just a pun on never interacting with spirits. Obviously, Scrooge is not going to give up alcohol, since we just heard him promise to have wine with Bob Cratchit. It's just a pun on the two meanings of the word spirits.
And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that truly be said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, every one. End of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Recording by Kyle Munley.
All right, there we have it. That is the end of A Christmas Carol deep dive. We have gotten through the whole book. I hope there are things you have found interesting along the way. I know that I've found a lot of interesting things researching for this. Hope it helps you read the book in a new way or see things in adaptations a new way. And if you haven't read the book before, maybe you've heard some things that are in there that you've never seen in any adaptations. Pretty much everything in the book is in at least one adaptation. There isn't a major scene that is left out of absolutely everything. Even that scene of Scrooge and the Ghost of Christmas Present talking about the bakers being open on Sunday, even that's in one or two adaptations that I'm aware of, and maybe even in more. Sometimes you get surprised. I don't believe it's been in anything we've covered yet, but it'll be in at least one in the future, I know. So, yeah, pretty much everything in the book is going to appear in one adaptation or another. I think of the 100 points on my adaptation meter. The only one that off the top of my head I can't guarantee is in at least one adaptation is when the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come and Scrooge are in that room with the body on the bed, and Scrooge thinks he's hearing some kind of poetry. And it might be the ghost talking, it might be his own thoughts, it might be something else. I don't know if that's in an adaptation. I didn't make the adaptation meter based on what I know is in adaptations. I just based it on what I think is important from the book. That's the only point I believe where I'm not positive it's in an adaptation. I hope I'm wrong. I hope there is a version that includes it. It would be tough because obviously it's just Scrooge's thoughts, right? So you'd have to communicate that it's something otherworldly. But that's the only one where I'm not positive there's at least one adaptation, and that's just a very small incident in a scene. It's not a whole scene. So, like I said, every scene from the book, you'll find it at least in one adaptation. Even that mention of the banquet. We get that in the 1935 film with the whole scene at the banquet. So yeah, that's why I like all these different adaptations because there's just so much. It's a short book, but there's so much in it, and if you watch all the adaptations, you're gonna find pretty much everything. It would be interesting to do, like, a compilation of every single scene from the book drawn from different adaptations. Obviously, it wouldn't be something you'd wanna watch as entertainment. It's more interesting as a historical artifact, but to watch it all through directly in book order, you know? So, yeah, speaking of the end of the story that we just finished here, it is hard for a lot of adaptations to give these scenes the proper time they need. I think a lot of adaptations kind of rush through the Christmas morning scene in the same way that a lot rush through Christmas Yet to Come. Present usually gets the long take, they get the longest time to really develop, and a lot will give at least some to the past, but Yet to Come is usually rushed if they need to cut for time. And Christmas Morning is usually pretty rushed if they need to save some time. Even the Alistair Sim one from 1951, the classic version, I think doesn't spend enough time on Christmas Morning. And that's a version I love. I won't speak too much to the versions we haven't reviewed yet, but of the ones I've seen, I think the ones that do Christmas Morning really exquisitely well are the 1935 Seymour Hicks one, which I have a lot of problems with, but not really the Christmas Morning scenes. He is so genuinely joyful in those scenes, and it really spends time with him being a new person. So I really like him in that one. And the other one is the Henry Winkler An American Christmas Carol, which really gives time to his reformation on the Christmas morning scenes. He does so many things, he rights so many wrongs, and he clearly shows that he's going to be a new person. And that's without a Fred character in that version either. But he's making it right to so many people. And Winkler's such a good actor. He's so believable in that whole film, and to see him as the changed Slade, Benedict Slade, on Christmas morning is great. So those are the two Christmas morning scenes so far that I think work best. The Albert Finney one, it goes for a while, but it's mostly just songs we've already heard. And that's not to say that the ones that are shorter are bad. I think like the 1971 cartoon, it's short, but the whole thing's short. It does okay. I think the Mr. Magoo one, it's fairly short, but it does okay, you know. But I like when they have a little more time. So we'll talk more about that when we get to future adaptations that do give it some more time. But for now, I would say the 1935 one and the American Christmas Carol from 1979 do it the best. We are getting ever closer to the beginning of the second season. I am preparing for season two of Scrooge A Christmas Carol podcast entitled From Mickey Mouse to the Muppets. We're going to cover all the iconic versions from the 80s and other iconic versions that you may never have heard of, and go into the early 90s, ending with the Muppet Christmas Carol from 1992. Sure, you know Scrooged and you know the George C. Scott Christmas Carol, but do you know Buccaneer Scrooge or Scrooge's Rock and Roll Christmas? These are real Christmas Carol adaptations that I will be reviewing, so just because the 80s have some famous versions doesn't mean there aren't some weird and obscure ones too. That hasn't been left in the 70s, despite the 70s giving us some truly, truly weird ones. The weirdness never ends, trust me. There will always be weird, bizarre, lazy, and just totally out there adaptations of A Christmas Carol. It's free to adapt. People are always going to be looking for ways to do it differently. So there's a lot to look forward to in this new season. This episode is dropping early September, so that means we are just 2 episodes away from the beginning of my new season. I'm really looking forward to it, like I said. But let's talk about what is coming next month. Okay, so next month will be a special episode that will give you a taste of what my Patreon followers will be getting in the future. I am going to be launching a Patreon in the near future. I'm thinking it'll be a three-tiered system, and one of the perks of being in the second or third tier will be that every month throughout the whole year, not just during the Christmas season, you will get a bonus episode where I talk about an adaptation of A Christmas Carol from a TV show. So lots of TV shows, mostly sitcoms, will do an adaptation with their existing characters, and one will take a Scrooge type role. And I was debating how I wanted to handle these because a lot of shows do it, and usually they're not really trying to be accurate to A Christmas Carol. They're just using that to tell a story within their own sitcom. So I decided that for my Patreon, if you subscribe to the $5 a month or higher tier, I will give a bonus episode every month where I review one TV show's take on A Christmas Carol. So this coming month, October, I am going to release the first review of a TV episode for free. Everyone can listen to it. I will be reviewing from 1985, The Jetsons' take on A Christmas Carol, and you'll get an idea of how those episodes will be. I will spend a fair bit of time setting up the show and its lore and the characters so you have an understanding of how they're adapting A Christmas Carol. It's going to be a little different than these episodes where usually I don't have to give too much background unless, say, it's, the Muppets or Sesame Street or Mickey Mouse, whatever, but people usually know who they are. A lot of these shows, you're going to have to look a bit more into the characters because some of the shows are fairly obscure. I don't think they're universal in pop culture in the way that, again, the Muppets or Mickey Mouse are. So, yeah, we'll talk about the Jetsons in the coming month, and you'll have the option in the future to subscribe to the Patreon. Please only do it if it's something you can afford. I know things are tight for everyone right now. It's something to help me, but if you can't do it, please just listening is great. Telling your friends is great. That's really what helps sharing, and that's all free. I'm never going to put this podcast behind a paywall. It's just a little perk for people who are able to give, and it is greatly appreciated. So be looking out for that. In October, I will be releasing that review of The Jetsons: A Christmas Carol, and I'll have more concrete details then about the Patreon as well. I'm still working it out, but by then it should be pretty set in stone, and I'll be able to tell you exactly what it will be. So be on the lookout for that. And be on the lookout for the second season because that's coming soon. Thank you for listening to another episode of Scrooge, a Christmas Carol podcast. Scrooge, a Christmas Carol podcast is written, edited, and hosted by Collin. Theme music is Christmas Day by TRG Banks. The LibriVox audiobook in this episode is A Christmas Carol, read by Kyle Munley. Leaving a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, as well as liking, subscribing, and commenting on YouTube, in addition to simply telling your friends, will all be a big help to me. I'll be back next month with another episode of Scrooge, a Christmas Carol podcast. Until then, make sure to live in the past, the present, and the future, and ensure that the spirits of all three strive within you.